Hello, welcome to Coreform Cubit 2020. My name is Randy Morris and I'll be your tour guide today. It's my hope that the video will provide enough of an overview so that new users can jump right into Cubit and start working. We're going to divide the video into three main parts. First, we'll talk about setting up Cubit, personalizing the layout to suit your preferences. And then we'll talk about how to get help. And then we'll take a few minutes and run through a very simple problem where we can see the application in action, play with some of the widgets. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first thing we want to do is change the working directory. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of the application, you can see where mine is pointing to. When Cubit's installed, typically it'll point to the installation folder, which is not optimal. So we simply go up to the File menu, Set Directory, and then use this dialog, use this Browse button to browse to the folder or the directory that you want to store journal files, or you want to store temporary models and all these kinds of things. We'll go ahead and do that and click OK. Now let's take just a few minutes and set the application up for our own preferences. I'll draw your attention back to the Tools menu, Options, and here we have a dialog that shows all the various options and settings we can set up in Cubit. First one that comes up is Command Panels. The thing I wanted to point out right here is this new option called Use Breadcrumb Trails. You can see the command panels over here. I'm going to select Use Breadcrumb Trails and save it, and you can see that the interface changed. And this looks a lot more like Windows 10 possibly, some other applications that use these breadcrumbs. What it's going to buy us is a lot of vertical space. Some of these command panels, for instance this one here, are quite long. When we have breadcrumb navigation active, we can see the entire command panel. If I go back and change options to not use breadcrumbs and hit save, you can see that that same command panel, suddenly there isn't enough room vertically to show it, so I need to scroll down. Most command panels will fit in this vertical space. A few of them won't. Therefore, we added that breadcrumb navigation to this last release of Cubit. Another thing that most people want to change is how their mouse behaves. Many of our mouse movements are fixed, but a few of them, those that have to do with the left, middle, and right button and drag, are modifiable, and we do this right here. We can rotate, pan, or zoom. I'll leave mine the way they are. The next thing we want to do is look at the layout. First, I want to draw your attention to this area down here, Look and Feel. Notice as I change these settings, the document windows over on the right are changing. The tab position is changing. All of the windows in Cubit are dock windows, which means they'll all stack on top of each other and they'll all have that same kind of behavior. So that's an option that you might want to work with. The next setting we should pay attention to is here under the History tab. In particular, journal files. I want to make sure that journaling is enabled, especially as I start out. If I've got that setting on, then all of the commands that I issue will show up here in the command line, and they will also be written to a default journal file. Journal files are what Cubit users use to replay sessions. Journal files can be parameterized. Journal files can include Python scripts. It's really the heart and soul of Cubit, so I like to have that journaling enabled. So I'll go ahead and save these settings. Finally, the last thing that I will do as I set up my UI for my own use is manage these various toolbars up here. There's quite a lot of them. You can see they scroll clear to the right. I like to do this. I like to take my geometry select tools and put down there, my meshing select tools and drag down there, my container tools and put down there. I'm going to leave my FEA tools up And in this particular case for CFD, I'm not a CFD guy, so I don't want to even see them there. So I'll just go to my view toolbars, turn those off. That setting will be saved, and next time you come into Cubit, things will look just like this. I find this to be a very efficient way to manage my UI. These toolbars can be docked anywhere. Just as a reminder, they are docking windows, which means I can bring them over here and dock them on this side. I can dock them on the bottom. They can go anywhere I'd like them to be. So I'm going to set that right back in there, and I'll call that finished. Cubit has quite an extensive help system. Let's dive in and see what's available to us. We'll go up to the Help menu, About. At the top you can see there's an email address, support@coreform.com. It's a good place to go get help. An even better place might be forum.coreform.com, and that forum is available to the public. And all of our users and many Sandia's users will go to the forum, look at the questions, answer questions for each other. We post articles there, we post other videos there. So forum.coreform.com is a great resource for help. Built into Cubit is documentation. I just launched this on a different screen. And this is also available from our website. So typical help, HTML help, there's the release notes for 2020.2. As I'm looking for guidance on how to do certain things, let's say I want to create geometry from the bottom up. Well, this would be a place I would come, creating volumes, creating curves, creating surfaces, these kinds of things. Has a nice index so we can look up things like merge, see what that might mean, imprint, and it'll take us to these areas in the help. It's got a good search capability. Another fun thing to look at are the Cubit tips. You can scroll through these. There's about 24 of these things. And they're kind of power user tips, other things that might help your workflows go better. I always tell people go ahead and pull these up at lunchtime and play with a few things. We've put in here some of the most important things. Mostly their efficiency shortcuts and whatnot. Another very useful piece of information is this. With focus in the graphics window, which is the window that has the blue background, these keys do important things. We'll play with a few of them today during our example. But again, this is another thing to play with and understand. If you're a keyboard wizard and you prefer using keystrokes, well, this is an answer for you. Many of the most important keystrokes in the graphics window are here, and these are the highlights. The documentation also mentions some others in the appendix. So for the next few minutes, let's just play with a few simple examples. And the reason I'm doing this is just to get you a better view of the GUI and the widgets and what's available and how you might use them. There's lots of ways to accomplish any particular task in Cubit. Again, you can get to the command panel and input commands there. You can do commands at the command line. There's actions on the property page. There's actions on the tree. There's context menus in the graphics window. There's just a myriad of ways to accomplish this. So I'm going to go through a particular workflow for some very simple operations, and hopefully that'll give you some insight into how to do this. First of all, let's just make a brick. So in a brick in Cubit is what we call just a solid object, a square. In this particular case, it's going to be width 10. It'll default to the Y and the Z with the X if I don't give it any other parameters, and there we go. So there we have a nice 3D brick. I can change its view, its display, with these buttons up here. I can select it, double click, or if I'm in the brick or volume select mode, a single click. I can select it from the tree. I can select individual surfaces, obviously. As you notice, as I select these different entities, let me do this, the values for those entities are shown here in the Properties page. And in this particular thing, we can see this particular surface 11. I can give it a different name. We can call it My Surface. As I do that, you see that there are commands that are journaled. So the command that was issued when I changed the name was Surface 11, rename My Surface. This is a great way to become a power user in Cubit. And by that I mean this: as you're using the command panel, as you're using these GUI shortcuts, pay attention to the journal commands that go out. And at some point, you'll be so fast, it might be faster to actually type some of these commands than to go find them in a command panel. If I go to the History tab over here, I can see the commands that I've issued so far: Brick X10, Surface 11, rename My Surface. I can come down here and it shows me that it's not merged, it's not virtual, it's using the ASIS engine. The color isn't set. Then that means it's the default color. There are no meshing values yet because it hasn't been meshed. I could select that surface. Let me go into surface pick mode here. Select that surface, right click. I could mesh it. Well, there you go. Cubit assigned intervals based on its size, which was 10. Cubit is unitless, so that 10 doesn't refer to any particular unit other than just account for intervals. Because it's a nice square, it picked a map mesh. I could select this surface and this surface, right click, mesh those also. Now I've got both of those surfaces selected here in the Properties page. The combined number of elements is 200. Combined number of nodes is 231. If I were just to select one surface, you can see that the combined number of elements is 100 and the number of nodes is 121. And calculate the meshed area right there. The meshing scheme is map, smoothing scheme is Winslow, and there's no sizing function. So that's kind of a fun exercise. Let's go ahead and do another one. So I'm going to go up here and select New. I don't want to save my changes, so I'll say No. Let's do another very simple example, this time using the command panels for everything. I'll hit Apply to create a brick. Then I'm going to come up to Mesh Mode, select Volumes, select a size, and I have these options for setting the size on a volume. Automatic sizing or an approximate size, give it an approximate interval count, set up a sizing function, or do geometry adaptive sizing. In our particular case here, let's go ahead and select automatic sizing. This is a pick widget. As you can see, when it's not active, it's a little bit darker than when I click in it, and it becomes active and lightens up a little bit. When the pick widget is active, it will only select items of that type. So in this case, I'm looking for volumes. As I select with my left mouse that volume, copies the ID into the pick widget, and it's showing me the auto factor size because this preview button is active. If I turn that off, you can see the node placements go away. But with this on and this particular slider, I can move it this way to have a relatively more fine mesh, this way to have a relatively more coarse mesh. I will apply the size, and then from this panel I can actually mesh. Let's go ahead and reset that mesh, reset that entity, removing the mesh. If I wanted to put a tet mesh on that volume, I'd simply go to Volume, Mesh, pick tet mesh off of the list of schemes, Go ahead and select that volume, apply the scheme, and hit mesh. Let's go ahead and do one more very simple example. I'll clear our model, start again. This time I'm going to make a brick right there. I also want to make a cylinder. And that's going to be a height of 11, so just a little bit larger than the brick. Radius of 3. It's created right there. I want to use that cylinder to cut a hole through the brick. So for that I'll need a Boolean operation. It's right here. I'll go ahead and subtract. I'm going to subtract B from A, so my A volume is the original volume. I'm subtracting that volume from it. I'm not going to keep the originals. I'll go ahead and apply. And there we have that. And then I want to put a mesh on that again, so I'm going to go here, select the mesh scheme, auto calculate. I'll select that volume. It'll give me then automatic size and an automatic hex mesh. I'll apply the scheme, mesh it, and there we are. I can examine the quality mesh. I'm going to use the shape metric. I've got all of these metrics available to me. The default is shape. I'll go ahead and keep these defaults to draw the mesh elements. Use a graphical summary. Hit apply, and it shows me that of all my mesh elements, the worst one is 0.7 shape, which is very sufficient. They're color coded, so those little elements right through there. I can clear the display by selecting this right there. Let's say I want to export the mesh. We'll go ahead and select this icon right here. I want to export an Exodus format. Let's call it test.e. Save that. We'll keep these default values. Hit finish. Exports the mesh. Come down here and look at the history, and we can see all of these commands that have been issued during this little demo. Something I want to show you before we leave is this. I can select any line in the history or any portion of any line and right-click, say Play Selected. What this will do is issue a reset command, which will remove the model and then issue another brick X10. So there we are. That's exactly what happened. I can do these commands here, just like we did from the command panel. That's pretty nice. I can go ahead and mesh that volume, look at the quality, and all of those things available from the History tab. And I also have all of those commands. I'm hitting the up arrow right here. So, all of that's available. As we wrap up, let's take a look at a few of the graphic shortcuts I mentioned earlier. First, we'll go ahead and clear the display. Focus is in the graphics window. One of the most useful things is to look at the internal mesh of a solid model. So I'm going to hit the X key, and then I'll use the J and the K to go back and forth. If I hit the Y key, I'll see elements in the Y axis. If I hit the Z key, I see elements in the Z axis. Going back and forth with J and K. Q exits that mode. That's just one example of some of the keyboard shortcuts that we've got in the graphics window. I encourage you to play with those and become a Cubit power user. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.